Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Arkham Knight New Game Plus difficulty walkthrough. This is the beginning of the game, and because this game isn't strictly split into any kind of mission structure, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be giving it some kind of naming convention. And this very first section of the game I've dubbed Evening the Odds, because it's something that Batman says to introduce the Batmobile, and I thought it was a really great idea. Just a really nice buzzword, but ironically, I feel a hell of a lot more vulnerable in the Batmobile than I ever do playing as Batman, which we will get to later on. But this moment right here, I've left in because you technically do get to control it. And something funny I noticed, if you mash the trigger at this point, you can use all your bullets before you're meant to go on a killing spree. And technically, I don't know if you notice, but I don't kill anybody. So I just created a fantastic time paradox here, because I'm not actually committing any acts of murder, I'm just pretending to. And later on they're going to be all like, that cop's going to never want to live his life when he finds out what he's done. And technically, I didn't do anything, you see. I got beat up by a crazy person, but I didn't do anything because I didn't get to land any shots. But this is the Batman that we all know and love. This is Batman Arkham Asylum. No, it's not. This is Arkham Knight, sorry. And this is the beginning of the game. New Game Plus, what do you need to know? It's just like every other Arkham game. You're going to bring with you your inherited items, your inherited upgrades, and the enemies aren't going to have the counter display. You're also going to come across scenarios that feature enemies and unique setups that weren't there in the previous game. You'll fight harder enemies earlier, and that's pretty much all of it. And it must be said, I haven't found any real section where it's noticeably really different in difficulty so far, and I've only recorded, the first quarter of the game. That being said, my first playthrough was on hard, and I didn't upgrade my life, so I did it all with base HP on hard difficulty, and I think it's a really good introduction to the difficulty. And right there is a pretty smooth transition into landing into this fight, and you might wonder why it was different if you've got that kind of eye. The game crashed. I don't think it was the game's fault though, I think it was my Xbox One's fault. It was having a rough day yesterday, and I can't explain it, but this is your very first encounter, and a couple of things are different in this game, you're going to notice. Some of the UI features are very different, some of the mechanics are slightly different, but for the most, this is the Batman combat that you've probably played before. That right there is something I need to talk about. The enemies now have this ability to run at you, grab you, and slam you into the ground, and it's an unblockable attack that you have to either interrupt them with a batarang, hit them with some kind of quickfire gadget, or jump over it, because if you try and beat it with a punch or beat it with a stun, it just gets you every time. And I'm not quite at the point where I'm fully used to pressing Y to counter things. I'm still pressing B thanks to playing too much Witcher and Bloodborne, so I get caught by it quite a lot. And on New Game Plus, I think the enemies do a little bit of extra damage, but I couldn't really tell you because I don't know enough about the game. Right now, I'm showing you what my upgrades were from my first playthrough. I always go for the special attack bonus, where if you time the button correctly, it doubles your score. I always go for the quicker way to get takedowns, and something new to this game, as you can see, I've added some damage to my Batmobile, and I've also given it a little bit of armor. And you might be wondering why I've given the Batmobile armor. Well, I recommend you do, because the Bat combat inside the Batmobile is not as bad as people are making out, and a lot of people are going kind of nuts about it, calling it shitty and boring and ruining the game, and comparing it to the Mako from Mass Effect 1, which is a fucking crime, really, because as much as I love the Mako, and don't get me wrong, I do, that was a bag of dicks. This is not a bag of dicks. It's just turns up a few times when it perhaps shouldn't, and there's a couple of boss fights and a couple of gauntlets that are grueling, guys, and I mean really grueling. So the first piece of advice I can give you here is get used to driving the Batmobile. I know, a novel concept, right? Well, idiot me, I'm the type of player that when I first played through this entire game, every time it put me in the Batmobile, I glided out of it and did Arkham City stuff. Because I play Batman for Batman, I'm not a big fan of driving at all. Although I do think they've done a fantastic job with the driving in this game, and I think it's streamlined to such a stylistic effect that you don't have to be good at driving to get a good grasp of it. That being said, there are some encounters where you need to to have a good understanding and control over weaving in between city streets in Gotham. And if you don't have it, you're going to find an incredibly frustrating boss later on, unless you're well versed. So, first port of call, get comfortable with the combat in the car, get comfortable with moving with the car, get comfortable with moving quickly and trying to get away and navigating streets and doing crazy turns, because it's all going to come in handy later on. Also get used to the aiming and things and the swapping between driving and the tank mode. And once you've done that, everything else can be compensated with probably upgrades, but you're going to notice that I'm not going to not upgrade throughout this New Game Plus walkthrough, but I'm going to do it at choice moments, because there's not a lot of abilities I want, and a lot of abilities are kind of exclusionary, which makes walkthroughs a little bit more difficult as Batman breaks that guy's arm. A good thing though, you'll notice, you see how it says level up at the top and it's covering my radar? It goes away. This was my biggest gripe with Arkham City and Arkham Asylum. For anybody who wanted to do a no upgrade run, you couldn't see a map. It completely hid the map. And now it doesn't, which I think is a fantastic new iteration, and I'm glad they've done that. It just shows a great foresight, but I think this is the easiest Arkham game I've played, to give people some confidence who are struggling. And if you are struggling, don't worry, you will get better with a bit of practice. The reason I say this is because of how powerful Batman is. Batman has so many new tools now that make him insanely strong. That being said, I do think there's a finesse to them, getting used to them, and I'm still getting used to them. One of the big things is the environmental attacks. Whenever you see somebody glow blue, it means if you press A and X, you'll do an environmental kill on them, which looks a bit like this. Although technically not a kill, you know what I mean. However, it can be a little bit finicky, and if you press it and the detection fades and they're no longer blue, Batman will kill your combo. And the amount of times where I've had my combo above 100 and I've been kicking Haas with a H and having a lot of fun, and I've gone to do one of those fancy moves to see what it did and it didn't detect it and it ruined my combo, is quite a lot. So it's something you need to get used to. Same with the weapons. Weapons can be picked up pressing the same buttons when they're on the ground, and every so often it keeps your combo going, but a couple of times it dropped my combo, so I'm not entirely sure how it correlates into keeping your score high, and hopefully when I figure it out I can explain it to you to save the frustration that I had. But the good news is, you don't actually have to keep your combo high in this game. There's no real benefit to it. The only good thing is of course it's more fun, or I think it's more fun, and then it enables you to get a little bit more experience. But this is your first introduction to the Bat combat in the Batmobile, and also to using the remote Batmobile, which is something the game's going to tell you to do quite a lot. So the lines will be white, and the moment they're about to attack they'll turn red. You need to get out of the line when it's red. I know it sounds obvious, but sometimes it can be tricky. If you press A in any direction, the Batmobile will do a little dash. It is the best way to avoid the lasers outside of just strafing them. And if you shoot these light drones on that purple light that they've got, it's an instant kill if you do it with the Vulcan cannon. The technique I use in the car, I hold both the right bumper and the right trigger, and then I just drive. I don't focus on pressing triggers or bumpers, I just hold them. So if you notice my accuracy is a bit crazy, or I'm firing when I'm not actually aiming at things, it's just because it's more convenient. You don't have ammunition, and it just enables me to focus on mobility rather than pressing buttons, which is a little bit like rubbing your belly and patting your head a little bit. But we're driving again, and the first introduction to doing the environmental puzzles with the Batmobile, I think, is horrendous. I think it's the worst way to introduce the Batmobile. And I think this because it put me off it. Because I was like, this is weird. Why would I want to do this? Why am I doing this? It didn't seem right. I apologise about the achievement as well, guys. I didn't think I'd get any, so I didn't turn my notifications off. I already have friends and messages and all that stuff off. I just didn't think I'd get anything. Silly me. But here's another fight. Here is the special feature of the tank, where if you kill enemies you fill these bars, and then you get to unleash missiles. However, if you take damage, it will lower the bar, so you want to try and be as perfect as you can to get those benefits, and it'll make these go much quicker. Depending on the upgrades that you chose, will depend on whether or not you have things like Virus and EMP. I'm only going to use those in the larger skirmishes. There's one where you're fighting with Ivy later on in the game, which is absolutely brutal. You have to take down 31 drones on one life bar, and they're all firing lock-on missiles that kill you in about 4 hits. Really rough, and there's no cover at all. I absolutely hated that part of the game. And I managed to do it without upgrading, which I was quite happy, but at the same time, I don't think anybody's going to enjoy that. And then there's the Arkham Knight fight, where I actually did upgrade to see if it'd make a difference, and it doesn't. Because one of the things that I have to criticise this game for is the boss fights. In Arkham Asylum, the boss fights were kind of interesting and gimmicky, and then of course Killer Croc was awful. Arkham City, the boss fights once again were kind of interesting and gimmicky, and I think they found a good balance. Arkham Origins had some of my favourite boss fights because they turned them all into fights, and I like fighting in these games, that's the stuff I enjoy. However, I appreciate every so often a nice gimmick. This game has almost no boss fights, and when you do them, you're in the fucking tank, and I'm not interested in driving a car during a boss fight, but unfortunately that's the direction the game went. But we're now in the GCPD, which is a wonderfully detailed and awesome looking place, but at the same time I think it's completely irreverent. You don't have to do anything here unless you want to get and delve into the lore and into the information in the world. I was double checking a couple of areas here to see if there was anything to it when you first arrive, because I didn't check it when I first came, but then I realised, you know, it's probably just the same every time you come here, and you do come here quite often. So I do a quick crossfade. This walkthrough will cover only main missions. I will not be doing any of the secondary stuff. I do not recommend you play the game like that unless you don't like Batman and you're just trying to beat it for achievement or trophy purposes, because I think the full experience is doing everything, and the walkthrough would take far too long to get on YouTube, and I'm trying to be quite swift because I have Devil May Cry 4 waiting for me to start. As much as I would love to play this game, and believe you me guys, immediately starting New Game Plus after not touching any side missions or really exploring the world is incredibly frustrating, but the professional in me is like, you've got to do this, dude, it's technically your job, so, you know, chin up, stop being a bitch and get this thing recorded. And it sounds callous, doesn't it? It sounds callous and crude and, you know, like another day at the office, and it truly isn't, because this game is incredibly fun. That is the ejection as we go up here towards Chinatown. One thing I found as well, I don't know if anybody else got this, but when Scarecrow talks to you, it reminded me so much of Doctor Strange, or whatever his name was, from Arkham City. And I don't just mean, you know, because he talked to you when you were walking around the city, but I mean straight up, I thought it was Strange for about half the game, because I wasn't paying attention apparently. His voice is not even that similar to him, I just think it's the way he speaks and his intonation that just brings back memories of Strange mocking you throughout City. But I appreciate why they do it as a narrative thing, but at the same time, I literally was like, is that Strange? Did he not die? Like, am I confused? And I'm not going to lie to anybody, it's been a while since I paid attention to Arkham City, but I have played it quite recently, because I played it on the PC, and the PC version is really, really nice. Not quite as nice as this, and I hear that the PC version of this is fucking appalling because it wasn't done by Rocksteady. The frame rate's in the toilet, like really, really poor issues, lots of slowdown. Oof, not cool. You see that? I didn't press that. Batman went close to something just then, or I flew close to something, and the invisible influence turned me around. It was pretty fun at the time. But this game runs at 30 frames per second. It does not hold that frame rate the entire time, but it does look fucking beautiful, guys. It's one of the most interesting and stylized looking next-gen games I've ever seen. I've seen a lot of people criticizing the visuals. I don't understand that at all. When this game is moving and you're seeing all the reflections and the really nice lighting and just a fantastic aesthetic, I think it looks wonderful. And it looks so good at times. I forget I'm fighting, or I forget I'm driving and stuff, and I end up making mistakes, which I make mistakes anyway, but when you're making mistakes because something looks so damn impressive, I think that's okay. Minus if you're trying to do like a perfect run or something. But here we go, pulling. I love stuff like that. Did you see the container that was covering that switch? It had about 9 paragraphs worth of warnings and technical information for an engineer, and then Batman pulls it off, and it's the biggest, most simple lever in the world. I could have pulled that. Why did they need all those instructions? Goddamn pedantic Arkhamites. But this is the introduction to traversal with the Batmobile, and I think this is a very bad introduction. So the Batwing turns up, which we still haven't got to fly the Batwing. We still haven't got to do the original Batman's you know, trench run of the balloons and everything against the Joker, which I always wanted to do as a kid. But, well, we'll stick with the Batmobile for the moment. We didn't do the Batboat either from Batman Returns. Did it have a name, the Batboat, or was it just the Batboat? What a terrible name. But this is the winch mechanic, and the winch mechanic works in a few ways. One of them is you're going to use it to gain purchase and pull things, like I just did then. The other one is you're going to use it as like a rock climber would his line. And there's not that many other uses for it. I actually thought you would fight a boss in the car, that'd be some kind of big robot, and you would strip its armor off using the winch. But that never happened. Instead, I'm not even going to talk about it, we'll get there. Yeah, the boss fights are really disappointing. There's about 3 of them in the game. 4 of them if you count that fight, which I really don't, because it's just like a Titan more than anything. Even though that fight is amazing. Which I'm talking about events that haven't happened, and there's people like, what do you want about? But this game features the ability to do missions with other people, yet no co-op, which is an interesting choice. And when you do those missions, you can swap between characters, and that is my favourite thing in the game. I would go as far as to say that should be the game. I wanted to play this entire thing as anybody but Batman. And I said this in my preview footage of this game. That's nothing against Batman, I love the guy. But I like playing as the other characters, and we've never really had the opportunity to traverse Gotham with them, except for Catwoman. And I thought Catwoman's traversal was awful. I didn't like it. But her combat was amazing. Catwoman is so fast and so fun to use. So is Robin, so is Nightwing. I haven't got the... is it the Red Hood? Or what that guy's called? I'm curious about it though, it could be really cool. I did get the Harley Quinn stuff, but I hear it's just challenge maps, and as much as I do enjoy doing challenge maps, I would prefer something a bit more substantial.
I need to evaluate the threat.
But once you've got here, Batman is going to talk about people in this room. And for some reason, it wants you to go up into a vantage point. Like you've never done this before, even though we've all played the previous games. And even if you haven't played the previous games, I'm not entirely too sure why this would help you. But, you know, go up onto a vantage point so that Batman can explain tutorial things. But the game's going to introduce us now to the mechanic that is known as the Fear Takedown, which is one of the single most overpowered aspects of the Predator game in this particular Arkham. It does not trivialise the game in as much as, for instance, the Mark and Execute did Splinter Cell Conviction, which a lot of people are saying that that's what they derived it from, although I think it makes sense in this game, and I think it ruined that game, but that's just me. Here, however, it makes a lot of sense, because in the last game you could do multiple takedowns, but you could never really do anything when you got in a spot of bother. In this game, if you mess up, you have the opportunity to do the Fear Takedown and kinda have a take back, which is a really powerful way to use it. Also, you can use it to take out 3 people regardless of their status, which I think is great. And you're going to see it in a moment, and it looks fantastic too, which does help. It goes a long way. Before you can do it though, you have to get the new Batsuit, which looks like almost every other Batsuit from these games. It's just kind of really armoured and, you know, Batsuity. I was hoping I'd be able to get some kind of additional costume DLC or something, so when I recorded this I could show you a slightly different looking Batman, but that just wasn't the case. It's also interesting as well, they didn't really bring back any of the mechanics from Origins, because of course the games were being developed at the same time, I believe. So the electro gloves that kind of trivialise that game, nowhere to be seen. However, spiritually the weapons are very similar. One of the things I haven't explained that you'll see later on is the weapons enable you to hit people regardless of what they have. If they're electrified, you can smack them with a weapon. If they have a shield, you can somehow smack them with a weapon. It's incredibly powerful, and the weapons are straight up overpowered. They will do some serious damage, and I love them. But before you can hit the computer, you have to rescue this guy. And then once you've rescued this guy and you hit the computer, we're going to be able to triangulate where Scarecrow's fear toxin's coming from, and then we're going to move on to the next part of the game. But that is the beginning of my Arkham Knight New Game Plus walkthrough. I hope you join me with the rest of it. It's a fantastic game. You owe it to yourself to play it, and if you're struggling with it, you know where to come. You take care now.